Welcome to the Almost Rocket Science Podcast, an ongoing discussion on the world of STEM. Welcome to episode 4 of Almost Rocket Science, a STEM-themed podcast. STEM is more important than ever these days. It has been all over in the news. It was the centerpiece of the State of the Union address, and schools around the nation are racing to increase their stake in it. We at Almost Rocket Science may play but a small part in sharing the world of STEM with you, but we have a challenge for our listeners. We ask you to share it with at least one young person you know. The goal of the podcast is to inspire our young ones to see how exciting and rewarding these careers can be. And with that knowledge, pursue a STEM career which will fit them. We also ask if the young person you know has a career they would like to see highlighted, please have them share it with us. To begin this episode, we invite you to recall episode 2, in which we interviewed Jen Shear. At the outset of that episode, we discussed the goings-on in the world of commercial space exploration. We mentioned that we were working to secure a guest from one of the companies leading the way. That is what we have for you in this, the 4th episode of Almost Rocket Science. So this week on our show, we have Collin Ake of Masten Space Systems. He happens to do business development and sales there. So welcome to the show, Collin.
Glad to be here. Glad to help out. Glad to jump in.
Cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe Masten Space and what you do for them?
Yeah, sure. So I work for Masten Space Systems. Masten Space Systems builds fully reusable vertical takeoff and vertical landing suborbital rockets. So we don't go into orbit, but we do provide high-quality microgravity access to the upper atmosphere and vertical landing capabilities to customers who are interested in that sort of thing. We build everything in-house, from the rocket engines to the code that runs the vehicle, to the tanks. Everything is pretty much done in-house or managed in-house. That also means that we have a very close loop between the engineering team and the people who operate the vehicles. Right now, they're the same people, actually, and that helps eliminate a lot of operational issues early in the design process. Engineers have to be the people that fly it. Then it's funny how many headaches go away. So Masten is probably best known for winning the Lunar Lander Challenge in 2009. Since then, we've been building another vehicle, had a couple personnel changes that we've taken care of, built the team out a little bit better, added a bunch of people, and we are moving along at a record clip. So what I do with Masten is business development, and that goes everything customer related. Anything from initial conversations at a conference or a trade show, to a follow-up meeting or call, to working on a response to a request for information or a proposal, to negotiating contracts, to managing contracts, to helping communicate between our customers and the engineering team. That's all on my plate. We're a small team. We have just a few people in the business office, and so that means a lot of responsibility falls across a couple different people. So that's a little bit about Masten and what I do here. Cool.
Well, obviously, we're pretty excited to see some of those videos on YouTube of the actual crafts themselves in their test flights, and I know my students are pretty stoked to see those things take off, and to relate it to the fact that, unfortunately, you can't necessarily get a view all the time of how high they actually are, but they could get an idea that it's pretty precision landing and everything else like that. So it's pretty neat stuff.
It's actually very precise, and it takes a lot of math and a lot of time spent behind physics books, and a lot of time learning how to engineer the thing so that it flies where it needs to. It's one of those. It's a very precise thing, and we don't have wings to help us. The rocket, if we shut the engine off, will fall to the Earth in exactly whatever configuration is currently in, and at the will of gravity,
and end up mangled.
Yes, end up in a unsatisfactory condition.
Yeah, I don't think the boss would be very thrilled with that. So, but I guess you got to have. I know. I guess you have to have some failures though to really reach out for your successes. So along the way, there's going to be some bumps.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you just have to understand. And I think one of the things you come to grips with early in education, early in your career, especially if you're working on a small team or a small company, look, nothing's going to go right the first time. That's just how it works. But you can learn from those mistakes and learn from those issues. What you do want to do is create an environment where you're not afraid to step into things that you don't know, and when you uncover things that you might not have known going into the situation, and you realize you did something the wrong way the first time, you know what? You just correct and you move on. You learn from the lessons of what happened.
I always tell my students, you have to be afraid to fall flat on your face because, if you're not pushing yourself there, you're never going to reach a new height.
Absolutely, very true.
Yep. So one of the students actually asked a question related, I guess, to your job. So how does your job affect or help the company?
Yeah, that's a good question. Masten builds rockets. We build really good rockets. And we build with a lot of precision and a lot of technical expertise on the part of our team. We have great products. But if you're building a company and no one buys what you have to sell, then you're going to end up out of a job. So my job is to bring in revenue. When it comes down to the bottom line, that's my job. My job is to find customers that want to pay us to do the things that we do well and bring them into the fold. So that's how I help the company.
As a teacher looking at the site too, notice that you guys are reaching out to not only teachers but to students to maybe even take along some of their experiments or I guess maybe little satellites and things like that. Maybe
Sure.
Maybe you can speak to that a little bit about what you guys hope to do with the outreach to education.
So education's something that we like to develop into a serviceable and sustainable market. So there's a couple things that means and a couple things that doesn't mean. What it does not mean is that we are not going to give flights away to anybody that wants one just because they're in an educational program. We have to make money. We have to find some way to pay for it. What it does mean is that we are more involved in the value chain and want to help find ways to fund students and educators flying experiments on our vehicles. That is important to us. It is probably not going to be an initial point of a large amount of revenue, but that does not mean it's not important.
It provides, I think, a nice gateway for you guys to really show that your technology works too, and with some stakeholders that are willing to take some risks because
Yes.
they're not risking big dollars on it as well.
No, and that's a good point.
So what is the real goal as far as what you guys hope to reach? What does Masten hope to do with these rockets in the future?
Sure. The primary purpose of our rocket, we build unmanned rockets. We want to focus on the cargo suborbital market. And because we build reusable rockets that return to the pad, we can offer flights on that rocket where the total cost of the rocket is not folded into a single ride. So what that means is, a lot of the current sounding rockets and other suborbital platforms, you have a fairly high cost of launch. Because we have the ability to fly that vehicle over and over again, we can spread the cost of that vehicle building and development over multiple flights. That's the purpose of what we're doing with our current line of rockets. We want to build excellent products, and what we would really like to be able to do is make space more accessible for people by making it cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that we can do that is with operational efficiencies and reusable rockets.
Cool. As far as, I guess, maybe to get an idea for myself, even picturing the rockets, maybe like the zombie and stuff, above the actual tanks and everything, you guys would add a payload section, is what I'm taking?
And the current rocket that we're in ground testing for is named Zero. Now, Zero is very similar in construction to Zoe. It's actually a reconfiguration of several of the same main parts of the rocket. There have been some modifications to different sections. But what we are doing is you have a tank on the bottom. That's your liquid oxygen tank. There are some tanks in the middle that provide helium pressure to push the propellants into the engine. And on the top, we have an isopropyl alcohol tank. And so on top of that, the rocket, in order for us to get up to these high altitudes, has to be aerodynamic. And above those tanks, when the nose goes into when it turns into the nose cone of the vehicle, we have a fair amount of space that we can provide for the payload. That's going to be the main payload bay. That does not mean that there are not going to be other mounting points along the vehicle, and we can make exceptions for different payloads that want to do different things or different sensors or whatnot. But that's kind of the general idea, is to put that payload bay above the tanks.
So what is, like, maybe, I guess, the height that you've tested these rockets to then?
So the current high flight for us is just over 1,000 feet on Zombie. The rocket that we are testing now, Zero, will max out at around 30 kilometers, which is about 100,000 feet. Right now, we're waiting on some FAA paperwork to come in before we can start doing some of these flight tests.
Mm-hmm.
So very quickly, when we start doing flight tests, you'll see that 1,000-foot barrier that we've hit so far completely fall away. We have several contracts with NASA that we will, they'll break our personal records and some industry records as well.
Nice. And 100,000 is pretty close to the edge as far as the main atmosphere, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, you'll get black sky. You're out of the majority of the atmosphere, but you're not to what is determined as or called space, technically speaking.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. I mean, to think that within a short period of time, with, of course, some government easing and some regulations and lots of paperwork, I'm sure you'll be there. So
lots of paperwork. So what this vehicle lets us do is prove out all the technical concepts that we need for the next vehicle to make it to space. And we'll start building that next vehicle this year.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, testing Zero will not, if you have to jump through a few more hoops, it's not going to slow down the production of the next vehicle then.
There are a bunch of trades. Most likely not, no. Because we're a small team, it does take a while for all of this to shake out. It's just the nature of the beast. If the guys are out doing a lot more tests on Zero than they thought they had to in order to get data for regulators, then that's going to keep them from developing the next vehicle. It may impact it some. How much? No way to guess.
No.
But it's on our development timeline, and we'll probably stick to that here.
Mm-hmm. So, and the nice part about it is each time you build a new concept, I guess, when you make that jump from like Zombie to Zero, you're incorporating the same basic principles, maybe making it a little bit bigger, adding maybe a little more redundancy, and certainly more precision as you guys build your skills.
Yes, and that's the idea. Masten was founded as a small company with not too much funding behind it, and that's actually, I think, one of our strengths because it allows us to keep focused. But the approach to vehicle development that we take is an iterative approach. We design and we test and we fly something, and we learn a lot of lessons as we do that. And we take those lessons and we iterate on those findings into the next version. And that's what we have done, that's what we continue to do, and that is what we will always do. We add a little bit more redundancy here and there, we add some systems, add complexity, test it to death. Just keep on going from there.
I like that you guys do test it to death, in the sense that you want to make sure, certainly when you send something up into the air, that you're not going to endanger people nearby, or certainly the product itself too. So, because you guys have a lot invested in it, I'm sure you can't just afford to crash zombies left and right. But.
No, here's the thing: is at some point, we're not invincible. A vehicle may crash at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been understood since day one. Our investors understand that.
Yep.
Our business model is built to withstand that issue. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to crash a vehicle.
No.
But and we do our testing strategically so that we don't.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, we might lose a vehicle. And, here's the message is that that's okay. And that's different than if you're flying people, you can't really afford to do that, obviously.
No.
But when you're doing unmanned vehicle development, you know what? You're probably going to learn a lot more from that failure than you learn from 100 successes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be more painful. But those are trades, and that's not something to be ashamed of. If a project fails, then you're going to learn a lot. We try to take it all in stride, do our very best to make sure that we succeed, and what comes is going to come. We can't control it all, so we just do our best.
Yeah, just watch the early footage of the space program, and you don't have to worry too much since you guys haven't crashed anything yet.
Yeah.
But, no, you didn't have all those failures. And it's true, any of that stuff, when it's new technology, you run the risk of having a failure. I mean, you're dealing with some pretty volatile chemicals and processes there.
Yeah. I can't tell you if our first failure is going to be the next time that we test or a year and a half from now, or never. I'm going to work with every single, every breath that I have to make sure that we don't have an anomaly that could potentially be a bad accident for the company or for anybody individually. Obviously you have to work towards that end. Mm-hmm. But the key is not being ashamed when things happen like that. This is rocket development. It's not easy. There's a lot of science and a lot of math and a lot of engineering that go into this. And when you put all these complex systems together and all these different failure modes, and sometimes you might overlook something. Now, this is why we test the heck out of the vehicle from day one. You start with one system, you test it to death. You add another system, you test it to death with that first system integrated in. And you keep on building the vehicle up, and it takes a while to do this. One of the nice things about building a reusable rocket is we can go out, we can put it on a tether, and we can take it for a short hover flight. And we can make a change to the code and go fly it the next day, and make a change to the code and go fly it after lunch. And there are modes that we can test in that normal rocket development, or I should say historical rocket development, don't have the luxury of doing. It's hard to test the space shuttle iteratively. Mm-hmm. You can do all the ground tests you want, but until it's flying, that flight mode you cannot simulate on the ground to some extent.
And I'm sure as you guys start to reach different heights, you're going to have to deal with obviously more difficult atmospheric conditions and things like that too. So
yes,
the nice part about it is, like you said, is the platform you're working with here is not something that you blast it off, so to speak, and put it up there, and you only got one shot at it. Whereas you guys can keep bringing it down. You can control it safely too. I'm sure you can override the program and bring it down if you notice something with it. So
yeah, and that's the benefit of how we do this, and honestly, that's the benefit of our vehicle design, and one of the reasons that we chose to exclude manned suborbital flight from our development time. But I like the fact that the cargo suborbital market is proven. Mm-hmm. There is a market worldwide for what we do. And we also bring to the table some technologies and some capabilities that not many other people have.
It's definitely going to be neat to see how it all spins out.
Agreed.
Another student question, what is the process of bringing ideas to life there at Masten Space Systems? Sure.
So there's a couple ways that happens. And I'm going to take a given system that we're developing and kind of talk about that for a second. A lot of times engineers are given technical issues that they need to go with. Or, hey, go design this system, go design that system. Ideas are brought to life in a couple of different ways. Generally, we have a discussion, or the engineers have a discussion. Remember, I'm the business guy, so I listen, but I don't really talk during this thing.
Mm-hmm.
The engineers have an initial discussion to set parameters. What do we want the system to do? What are the goals? Obviously, if you're building a rocket, you have mass issues. You're going to have a mass budget for the system. You're going to have a number of technical criteria that have to be met. And the engineers involved have a few discussions and often come to a couple ideas of how you could go about solving this issue, how you could design this system. And they go off and might come up with 3 or 4 different ways to do this. Not all the way down to the detailed nuts and bolts, but at a high level. Here's how the system could work, or here's another way the system could work. And sketch out a few different possibilities. After those possibilities are sketched out and the team's had some time to come up with a few ideas, we get a larger group together. And now we realize we're a small company, so that means most of the engineers pile back into the same room and say, okay, here are the different concepts that have been sketched out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a review, and there's a discussion. Sometimes it's a very particularly lively discussion. People have opinions about stuff, and that's a good thing. Honestly, you're building rockets. There's safety involved. You want every single aspect of every single design decision discussed to death. So they do that. And then they might narrow it down to 1 or 2 different ideas, 1 or 2 different approaches, and flesh those out a little bit more. And then come back and do that again. It's an iterative process to take an idea and go to a system or a product or a part. You have to start with a few different ways of doing things and then funnel it down to that one best approach for whatever reason you choose. And there are all the design trades and all the engineering trades that you can make when approaching a system. So it's key to take that approach of start with an idea, start with a bunch of ideas. Ideas are free. They take time, but come up with a bunch of ideas and then select the best ones, develop those a little bit more, and down select.
Cool. Well, we appreciate that little bit of insight too. I mean, one of the big things I focus in on with my students, being a technology education teacher and focusing in on engineering as well, is that design process that really happens, and getting them to hash out a lot of ideas and not just going with their first idea. Although the good thing is
yes.
in the classroom you can start building that up and having these different ideas and everything else. So it's pretty cool to see it come to life, but also to know that design process that you're learning, that you're trying to build at that level, actually is being done in the real world. So
yes,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it is. It is. That's the exact approach that we take.
Nice. Now, in regards to, I guess this is another student question, in regards to some of the flights that you hope to offer with the payloads and everything.
Sure.
This one of my 6th grade students said, "Are living things like insects allowed on the flight?" I think he's thinking of a crazy science project
Sure.
already. So.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Sure. Things like that are absolutely allowed on board as long as they meet standard regulations, or I guess I should say standard, the industry standards for how you treat living things that fly in space will have to be followed. You can't just say, I've got a pet mouse, I'm flying it. There are ways of going about this that have been developed and accepted by the industry. So the answer is yes. The exact how of that, I don't know the details to yet. We have not been approached by anybody that wants to fly a live animal just yet anyway.
I think we saw that line about science fair projects and the Google Science Fair, and he's already thinking ahead.
Absolutely.
So hey, why not? But all right. Well, now getting some of the questions actually start heading more down to actually you and your experience and how you got to where you are today. So have you had any other jobs before Masten Space that led up to the one you have now?
Sure. Absolutely. Yes, I have. So my background is in the technology startup world. I was part of a company that grew from, I was employee number 3. When I left, there were about 65 employees. So I've been part of a growth startup before. After that, I joined a large research organization, actually, the Georgia Tech Research Institute. And They do a lot of DoD and government research, and I actually worked in the business development area there, helping them build systems that would support and connect their different organizations within their 1,400 person organization. I've had a few other things, dabbling in other technology startups mostly, and I kind of made a choice that I would really much rather prefer to work in aerospace than I would technology. There's a couple reasons for that. So one of those is technology is a fad. Things come and go. Twitter is hot. All of a sudden, you see a bunch of Twitter clones pop up. Location-based stuff is hot. All of a sudden, a bunch of location-based startups pop up. And you might make some money at it. But you can't really say that you changed things long-term in the world, other than how addicted people are to their phones. In aerospace, you can make a difference. If you're building rockets that are going to drive down the cost of access to space and allow more people access to space than ever before, that matters. That makes a difference long-term for humanity, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really kind of what drove me to this. Other than it's just really cool, I've always wanted to be a part of something like this. And, I grew up, thanks to my dad, watching, following NASA in the news, following the different projects, following the different things that are going on. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things, it's really a dream come true for me. It's also a lot of fun. Yeah. Let's be honest. Not a bad job to have.
No, I was going to say, right? You could be sitting in a cubicle somewhere and being totally unhappy, or you could get a little dirty, right? Get some travel, all that good stuff. I think one of the things they were worried about is Masten being such a small company that, did you feel like it was a bit of a risk taking a job like that?
Absolutely, it's a risk. But you know what? Here's the thing about small companies. You learn a lot more, a lot faster than you ever would with a large company. Mm-hmm. Because you have to wear multiple hats and juggle multiple projects, multiple things at the same time, you learn time management. You're going to get your hands dirty in a lot of different areas quickly. And yeah, it's a risk, but look at the reward. Look at the potential for not just me personally in my career or anybody else in their career and what you end up with if that company succeeds. But you have to look at what happens to the industry and what happens to schools when kids could afford to send their payloads to space. But think 25 years down the road and how this might impact, and look at the potential reward and how much of a difference it can make. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's a risk. It's riskier than working 40 hours a week in a cubicle in a giant cubicle farm. Of course it's riskier, but the reward is so much higher that that's something I'm okay with. I like taking calculated risks. It's not smart to take risk for no reason, but if you look at the rewards on both sides and decide what's important to you and prioritize that appropriately, you can make that decision in a framework that makes sense for you.
Well said. And I think, too, in this economy, working for a small company like that, there's a little bit more stability because you're not worried about having half the cubicle farm being cut away. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, look, here's the other side of it is, yeah, my job is a lot more unstable than if I worked for a large corporation. That's just the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. We're a startup. One governmental change in direction, we're a startup selling to government. If government goes a different direction with a certain program or two, and we don't have the ability and the connection with our customers to maintain that relationship throughout political swings, then we could go away. That's always a risk. Mm-hmm. But hey, what I don't want to happen, and I think this is kind of what it comes back to me, is I don't want to end up 20 years down the road having wished that I had taken that risk that one time and gone and helped with this startup rocket company that somebody else helped make successful.
And let's face it, you're the business guy, so if you're not bringing in the dollars, you'll see the writing on the wall very quickly.
Yeah, no, bingo.
So I guess that's good. You're actually extra motivated in that sense to go out and get the business. So
no, absolutely, and it's fun though. And I think that's what I really like about my job is, hey, I'm not an engineer, but you don't have to be an engineer to make a difference in the aerospace world. It helps sometimes. It gives you a leg up on traditional aerospace without a doubt. But if you want to make a difference, there are ways you can plug into teams that need your certain skill set, and you don't necessarily have to be the engineering stereotype where you went to you went to the Air Force so you could become a pilot, so that you could one day be an astronaut for NASA, and hope you beat out the thousands of other people that have done that. There are ways to make a difference without an engineering degree and in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things that we've been learning through our interviews is that even though these science, technology, engineering, and math careers may involve some avenues of that, but a lot of these businesses, they need other people that do other things too to support them. And you kind of come in through a side door, but you still get to the same place. And yet, in your case, wearing the many hats, you're learning things that you probably never even dreamed that you'd be doing.
Yes, absolutely. But that's okay, because I think that there are a lot of things that you don't dream of doing that you find out you actually really enjoy. And a lot of times that just means you have to go try it. Or you get put in a position where all of a sudden you have to follow up with a certain, for instance, I'm now the contracting officer on our government contracts. It's not something I've done before. It's not something I have tons of experience with. But there's no faster way to learn about it than jumping into a role that you're uncomfortable with, because you go seek guidance and you go learn the necessary things and begin to learn. And it's not that bad once you get into it. It just seems a lot more daunting when you're not involved.
Got to get in the game, right?
Indeed.
Sitting on the sidelines is definitely boring. I know from my own experience working for my father when he had a startup company and doing the same thing when it was just a small company and you've got to deal with customs, and I'm like, who knows anything about customs here? So you've got to do some reading, call some people, make some connections, and then stumble through it the first time and hopefully get a response either way that you did it right or wrong, and then figure out how to go the next time. So
the other thing you have to realize is that if you walk into a situation and say, hey guys, this is my first time doing this, I'm going to do my best job at it, but please feel free to give me feedback, good or bad, about what I can improve. People appreciate that kind of open honesty. Take your best stab at it. Do your best. Try hard. Read up on it at night. Put in the extra hours to become good at it. But always give people that opportunity to give you feedback, and people are going to jump at it. If you don't open that avenue for feedback, then you might not get it until it's too late, or you might not get it because it's negative. But if you let people know that you're open to negative feedback or constructive criticism on how you can improve, that's important.
Yeah, definitely a good point there. Moving on to a little bit somewhat connected question.
Sure.
I guess, when did you start getting interested in technology and actually aerospace, I guess? Sure.
Well, I've always been around engineers. My dad's trained as an engineer. My brothers ended up going to, I went to Georgia Tech, and they ended up, both of them, at Georgia Tech as well. My grandfather was an engineer. I've kind of always, spoken engineer. But and this is going to sound really bad, I don't like doing math. And when I was in high school, I kid you not, when I was in high school, I didn't like doing math. And I was good at it, it was fine, I could do it, but it bored me. I was tired of it. And I think I realized that I was better interacting with people than I was interacting with a textbook or with a sheet of paper. And I started pursuing the business side of things, but always staying focused on the technical aspects. I went to Georgia Tech, I went to their business school, but I've always been involved in pretty much each semester I'd have at least one class with a bunch of engineers that was either focused on something technical. And so I did that. I'm a gadget geek. I keep up with all the latest trends and what's going on. And I really like being involved with small teams. And so that all kind of funneled its way into the technology startup thing. Aerospace started a long time ago. For me, it was never about flying. We chatted a little bit before we started the podcast about how I'm not a big heights guy. I don't like heights very, very much. So flying a plane was never this, oh, I want to grow up and I want to fly a plane, and that's what I want to do. But understanding the solar system was different. Realizing just how big the moon was, and that it was actually another ball floating around our planet, and how far away the other planets were from us, and how they all worked, and how all the different orbits happened, and all that stuff intrigued me. And I mean, hey, I'm a guy. I like fire. Rockets are cool, right? Rockets have always been cool. I put SC rockets on Hot Wheels. I've set SC rockets off in parking lots without anything attached to them. That's a bad idea. Don't do that at home. Please don't ever use SC rockets inappropriately. But I've always done that sort of stuff. And so when I saw the X Prize, the original X Prize, right, unfolding in front of my eyes, it was one of those, man, I'd really like to be involved, but there is no way there are aerospace companies, or particularly space companies, in Atlanta. And it turns out that Masten had somebody in Atlanta. Michael Ewing was one of Masten's founders, and was in Atlanta. And Mike and I ran into each other, and there's another gentleman in Atlanta named Stephen Fleming. He's involved with X, also out in Mojave, one of our neighbors. And he sent me to Mike and said, "Oh, you should talk to Mike and work for them." And I interned with them for a semester when I was in school, and then I worked free for a little bit, nights and weekends, because it's fun, because it was a passion of mine, because I enjoyed being involved, and I saw the potential for Masten. And so I guess that's kind of how everything unfolded. I've always been a tech guy. I've always been interested in aerospace, because I didn't get an engineering background, an engineering degree. I don't understand everything that I talk to people about, or not everything that's talked about around me, I should say. But I understand the concepts because I've been around it. And it does take, even if you don't get that engineering pedigree, time learning the language. And, there's a need for translators between the business side of things and the technical side of things. You can't just always talk to technical people the rest of your life. You have to talk to the business guys. And you have to be able to talk to both technical people and business people if you're going to be successful in today's business world. That's kind of the unique route I took to working for an aerospace company.
I think you bring out a really good point, and I would say that so far all of our guests have made the point that communication skills and working with others are huge skills that you can build no matter what level of school you're in, or even, small little jobs, things like that are really going to benefit you in the whole big picture, the whole long term of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it applies across everything you do, I think. So I'd agree with that.
Cool. And I guess the only other question is, who inspired you? One of the kids put down, who's maybe your idol, but I guess who really inspired you to go down these routes?
I have to say it's probably my dad. He had a telescope. He kept bringing it out when we were young. I think that he's probably the primary influence on why I decided to turn down this route. I don't really have any idols. There are a lot of people that have done a lot of good things. A lot of people have a lot of good experience, and there are a lot of people you can learn from. In fact, I think you can learn something from everybody. But everyone out there has made mistakes. And they'll tell you that if you ask them, and they've learned from them. And I think that's probably what makes people who they are. I don't put anybody else above, I don't put one person above another as far as they more influenced me than somebody else did, because everyone has their own path that they've taken. Everyone has their own mistakes that they've made, lessons that they've learned, and there are positive things about emulating their lifestyle and how they've gotten there, and there are negative things. Those negative things might teach you as much or more than the positive things, but that doesn't mean you should go take the worst path possible just to learn a lot. So I don't know. It all comes back to having that curiosity and that desire when I was younger, and really seeing an opportunity that I could apply my skill set to this space, if you'll pardon the pun.
We will. And that really takes us to the last question that we have been asking all of our guests. And what is STEM? What does that really mean to you, and why is it so important in this day and age?
I'll tell you why it's important. Is I meet with a lot of different organizations, and I meet with a lot of different experts in the field. There are a lot of smart people that have been doing this for a very long time. And we need to have the people trained to replace them when they decide to go retire to their beach house because they've been very successful. It comes down to people that do what they love and love how they get to do it. And we need to keep developing people that can jump into those roles. And let me tell you firsthand, this is a whole lot of fun. I've talked to our engineers, and I've talked to a number of people my age, that are younger in this world. It's a ton of fun to jump in and try to make a difference in a small company in a non-conventional way. And you know what? I've talked to people in larger organizations too, and it's a ton of fun to jump in there because you can learn from the people that have been around the block and have done this 6 times before. So I think STEM comes down to having the people trained that can jump into the jobs that we're creating. And if we want to drive down the cost of access to space so that it benefits the society as a whole, then we have to have people that are dedicated to finding ways to do that.
Again, a good answer, and we really appreciate you articulating the fun part of it, the need for it, and certainly we really appreciated you taking the time to answer our questions too.
You bet. I've been glad to help out. Enjoyed it.
Cool.
I will say, the one thing I've got to say is the people out there that want to work in this industry is figure out what you're good at, work your hardest to become the best at it, and drive towards your goal. And also watch our YouTube videos because they're fun.
Again, we really appreciate you taking your time out of your business trip too to come on the show. So,
you bet.
We hope you enjoyed that interview with Colin. He definitely has some interesting insight on the STEM world. That's all for episode 4, but we need ideas for upcoming episodes. So drop us a line at almostrocketscience.com or on Twitter at almostrocketsci. Thanks again for listening. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for Almost Rocket Science, visit our site at www.almostrocketscience.com and use the Contact Us form there. Almost Rocket Science is produced and edited by Jeff Burgeon and Rhett Youngberg. Thanks again for listening.